Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have a early impression video, and I'm calling it an early impression because this is actually the first time I've had a chance to wear this as my scent of the day. I have worn it to bed once because of a very generous decant sent to me by Senator Eddie. It's been a while since a decant from Senator Eddie's stash has made an appearance on the channel, but sometimes that's how it goes. If you do send me something, please be patient. Because there's probably 800 other fragrances ahead of yours that were sent previously or something like that that just need to sit, and I need to sit on my skin and cook on my skin over time and let the brain kind of work its magic while it sits on my skin. And so these type of reviews take time, and this was probably sent to me maybe a year and a half ago. And I'm just getting around to it, and I mean, it could have been another year or two before I even got to this, but this is the very first time we're talking about this brand on the channel, and again, it's thanks to the generosity of one of you guys, so again, thank you, Eddie. And so this is called Gincense by the house of Oliver & Co. Now, something very interesting about this house is that it is actually no longer called Oliver & Co. Perfumes. It has been changed. So the name has been changed. You can see this is actually from the Illustrated series, as they call it, the Illustrated series. But he changed the name to something I don't care for as much. The name is now called Avant-Garden, instead of Avant-Garde, Avant-Garden, Lab. Avant-Garden Lab is what it's now called. That change happened in 2018, if I'm not mistaken. This is a fragrance that came about in 2012, and the brand was founded in 2010. It's actually a Spanish brand. So originally, Oliver & Co. had a storefront, and if you actually look up Oliver & Co. perfumes, which again, it's kind of written like this. Sorry, it's a little hard to see, but I'll leave the name in the comments. But there you go, Oliver & Co. perfumes. Sebastian did an interview with this guy, so we'll talk a little bit about the brand here in a little bit. Actually, let's do it now. Let's do it up front. Since this is the first time that we've had this brand on the channel, let's talk a little bit about this. So it says Oliver Valverde, who is the founder and the perfumer, which we'll get to, is the perfume designer and creative director of Avant-Garden Lab, known as Oliver Co. before the rebranding, which has been launched in July of 2020. There you go. I answered my own question. So in 2019, Oliver also founded Olfatorium, an independent institute of perfumery and olfactory art, where he teaches perfumery for beginners. He is well renowned for his unique creative artistic approach, specifically about synesthesia, vision to smell is what that basically means. Synesthesia is vision to smell. Independent fragrance designer Oliver Valverde. I hope that's correct. Valverde. Or Valverde, I'm sorry if it's one or the other, but is known as an outsider in the perfumery world. Since he was a child, he has been fascinated with scientific laboratories and nature. From an early age, he learned to appreciate raw, beautiful materials in their purest form. His father was a marble carver. Born in Andalusia, Spain, Oliver grew up visiting his workshop, learning the ability to transform natural elements. At the age of 28, after moving to Madrid, he started to blend botanical essences and aromas, molecules as a hobby. In a blink of an eye, he realized that he was discovering something unknown yet familiar at the same time. It was a crucial revelation in his life. Despite his lack of formal training in the perfumery field, which he basically in the video with Sebastian said is none, and not imposing himself in any creative limits, Oliver started to experiment with both natural and synthetic elements, combined with innovative creative concepts to transform them into a new feature, unconventional fragrances that transcend time and trends. Through this creative mindset into his creations, Oliver translates his vision of perfumery today, always breaking the codes from an olfactive to a visual point of view. Scents are astonishing, design and graphics remain unique. There is no gender limits, a whole art portfolio for people expecting a brand to go beyond the standard of perfumery offerings. Okay, so I am going to do some fresh sprays because I really, really enjoyed wearing this today as my scent of the day, if you will. So there's a fresh little spray. Oh, the opening is beautiful. So let's talk a little bit about Gincense, which again came out in 2012, but I have to warn you again in full disclosure because I like going into this kind of detail in my reviews. So Gincense was originally released in 2012. It was then discontinued. So this version from Oliver & Co. has been discontinued. And to his credit, if you go to the Avant-Garden Lab website, they are very open about the fact that it has been reformulated. And here's what it says. It says, ginger and frankincense galore, hence Gincense, not gin incense. Not like gin, the alcohol and incense, but ginger and incense. So the name Gincense take a new dimension by contrasting them with raw materials that modify and exalt their olfactory shape to a new extreme. I like that word, exalt. In Gincense, the perception of one of the most sacred and spiritual smells has been destroyed, manipulated, deconstructed, and ultimately redefined. So here's the little blurb. Important info. Gincense has been reformulated from the original 2012 version. That's the one I have here. It keeps the same fragrance feeling. The blast of frankincense and ginger are still there, with more varieties added though, like new ginger CO2 extracts, the more types of frankincense. The reformulation was focused on the levels, some molecule substitution, and the addition of a few new materials. Very open, and I really appreciate that. I think that's kind of a cool little write-up. And so whenever they switched the name from Oliver & Co. to Avant-Garden Lab, they also went to being an exclusive 100% online brand. So they closed the in-store, basically place, a storefront that he had in Spain. And it says, in 2018, we said goodbye to the current soulless and often expensive restrictive fragrance retail model and said hello to creative freedom. Most of our budget goes to the source of the best raw materials. And interestingly enough, so you can only purchase these online, direct to the consumer. And Gincense for 50 mils goes for 96 euros. Awesome. For this type of quality and creativity, I think this is a doozy. I think this is a very interesting brand. Now, to be fair, if you know me, you know that I have a love of incense, okay? I love notes like incense. Incense is actually one of my favorite perfume ingredients. Actually, the word perfume comes from an incense, if you will, because perfume basically meant to smoke. And so that's where the word perfume came from. So incense and fragrance are inexorably linked together. But what's interesting about Gincense to me is that this is basically a take on an incense fragrance with a twist, is basically what this is, okay? So it starts off, and I just did a spray for you guys, but it starts off very green and slightly herbal, slightly floral, slightly sour, slightly bitter. And the incense is the star of the show. Instantly, you get it. You get it from the very beginning, and it honestly lasts until the very end. I've got like a 9-hour dry down here, and I can still smell remnants of the incense. Lightly, very lightly, but it's still there. Like it's just kind of, coals that are slightly going out, but still giving off a little bit of incense. And so the incense is the star of the show, and it makes no qualms about that. It steals the spotlight, in my opinion. But at least to my nose, the fragrance has bits and pieces of a couple things kind of coming in and out. First of all, the ginger, which is the second star of the show and the second part of the name. It gives it basically this zing. The best way to describe ginger for me is it gives it this zing. Something that almost catches your attention. Like if you eat a piece of ginger on your palate, it's like an explosion in your mouth. The ginger adds this zing to this fragrance is basically what this does. But there's also this weird sort of saltiness that I would say like revolves around the incense. Now, the name, like I said, don't get it confused with gin and incense. I went through a couple comments from the video Sebastian did, and a lot of folks were like, wow, gin and incense sounds amazing. Again, it's ginger and incense. So there's no booziness in this fragrance, although Gincense remix or remastered or something, part 2, sounds like a badass fragrance with gin and incense. But basically what you're going to get with the ginger is this very sharp, bracing, invigorating aroma. The ginger comes across as very uplifting in a sense. Zing is really the word, right? And it adds this kick to the fragrance. It really makes the incense have a little bit of modernity. Some incense fragrances can feel to some folks, not to me. I love just classic incense, cold, churchy incense. I have no problem wearing that anytime, any time of the year, really. Most people wear incense in the winter, but it's June and I'm wearing this and I'm absolutely loving it. But the ginger adds a little bit of modernity, okay? A little bit of taking it doesn't feel as down, as heavy as some people complain traditional classical incense fragrances are. It adds this kick to the fragrance, just like when you're eating sushi, right? And you eat a piece of ginger, you get that zing, that awakening of your taste buds. It's supposed to cleanse your taste buds in an effect, but it does that through almost like cleansing a forest through fire. I mean, there's this. Someone even described if you eat too many pieces of ginger at once, like a burning sensation, right? And so the ginger here has this very lemony zing that just kind of makes your eyes widen when you smell it. It's really, really beautiful opening and you have to keep in mind that saltiness revolving around the outside is very, very interesting. The saltiness is definitely there, as is some other things like spices, laurels, which are also known as bay leaves. They say violet leaves play a part here, and exotic woods, which we'll talk a little bit about. I think those exotic woods are things like hinoki and a couple other things. We'll talk about those later on. But I'm going to bring your attention to the marine note that is actually listed. So if you go to Parfumo and look this up, you're going to see marine notes as one of the notes. And I will tell you, I don't get a traditional marine note smell from Gincense. Not in the sense that you're in a pool or the ocean or something like that. Not in the sense of the aquatic sense. Not in the 90s aquatic feel, let's say, okay? This smells to me almost like a rock or a mineral, a piece of quartz or something that was like in the ocean maybe, and you took it out, and what's left behind, the ocean leaves that brininess on anything that was, even the beach, when it comes up and pulls back on the beach, you can almost see the salt and stuff and brine that's on the sand, right? The griminess that's kind of left behind. That is the way that the quote-unquote marine note in here feels. It adds a freshness but a saltiness. Probably a better note would have been an ambergris note to me, because yes, you can pick up bits and pieces, but it's like briny. It's like what's left behind, right? Rich Mitch described a fragrance that he absolutely hated in terms of all the other notes leave and this one note is left behind recently. And that is kind of how the saltiness in this fragrance feels. It feels like something came up around the fragrance, and when it disappeared, it kind of left remnants of the saltiness still there. And that's the way the salty touches feel in Gincense to me. It adds a freshness, obviously. And it's interesting because the fire aspect of incense makes it seem like fire then took that sort of salty, briny, left behind aspect here, let's say on the ground, on the beach or whatever it is. And so now where the ocean used to be and the brine is kind of left, all of a sudden the incense adds this burning hot. Think of summer days where the ground is so hot it hasn't rained in forever, it starts to crack. And you get this cracked, almost like dry, desiccated feel with the smoky incense like finding its way through the cracks. That's the image of this to me. You have to have the brininess to leave behind, or else it's impossible for me to describe that salty feeling that I get from this. I don't get that traditionally aquatic vibe, if you will, but I do get the salt. And what's so fascinating about the scent to me is that attention-grabbing, flavorful sort of like burst of ginger that most people associate with very short amount of time, right? You put ginger in your mouth and you get that amazing explosion of flavor, and then it very quickly goes away, right, as you eat more sushi or whatever you're doing. But here, the ginger just keeps rolling into that dry down, and probably the part of me that made me go, this is full bottle worthy for me, for my 2 cents on it, is that while wearing this today, I wore it to bed and I didn't get this, but when I wore it today, I picked up a lot more of the fragrance construction. And it instantly took me back to childhood memories from the 4th of July. My family is still actually friends with one of my father's best friends, used to own a farm in Oklahoma, and we would go up there for the 4th of July, where he had lots of land, ton of land, and he had cows and all this other stuff. But we would go specifically to do fireworks and celebrate the 4th of July, away from the big cities, right? And so I have very fond memories of shooting bottle rockets at the cows that were way too far. We would never hit them anyways, but just, as a little kid, you're like aiming for the cow way the hell out there. Or doing like the M80s or the Black Cats, or, those fireworks for kids. Of course, the little kids did the sparklers and stuff like that. But anyone who's ever done one of those fireworks that I mentioned, the M80s, especially the Black Cats, that have that fuse that you have to light with the, what do they call it? Sparks. What's that thing that, damn, I'm not going to be able to think of it now, but like a puck pick, or one of the things you use to light the firework with. But knows that smell of like burning fuse, right? Imagine the smell of like black gunpowder just kind of lingering in the air for a short amount of time. Not gunpowder in the sense of a pure gunpowder note, because there are some fragrances I've smelled that really remind me of gunpowder, but this reminded me of the fuse of a firework being lit. And I have so many precious memories stored as a little kid, just spending all day doing fireworks and being excited about the 4th of July when you're a little kid, and stuff like that gets you very excited. And this fragrance made me think of people and memories and friends and family I haven't thought of in years. And I mean, that's what part of what fragrance is. It's supposed to be a little bit of like a time machine. It's the closest thing to a time machine humans have, in my opinion. And for me, I love the way this fragrance smells like. I'm starting to get a little bit of it already now, but there's still a lot of that brown, briny, salty ginger that you have to work through. Once you get to an hour or two, that's where that incense really starts to feel like a lit fuse of a firework and letting off this, and if you think about lighting a fuse of a firework, there's that spark from the fuse being lit, right? And the ginger almost adds this spark to the way the fragrance smells as well. And wearing it today, I mean, it's July 25th today, so we're only very close to the 4th of July anyways. We're a couple weeks away. And so the weather is very similar here in Texas to what you would expect during a 4th of July type day. And so wearing this today and thinking about those memories, I've really, really, really enjoyed this. Much more than I thought I would. I mean, I tested it once and I said, okay, it's interesting, and I kind of put it aside. But actually wearing it as a scent of the day unlocked a lot of things that you just missed just only wearing it to bed. So will you like this fragrance as much as I do? Well, that's a tough one, because I guess it really depends on how much you appreciate a unique take on incense like I do. I absolutely love incense, and I've been debating reviewing some of my all-time favorite incense fragrances. Like, for example, Bois d'Incense, I think, is one of the most perfectly natural-smelling incense creations. There's a issue with incense that one of the issues from my understanding is that if you make an incense note smell very natural, it doesn't last very long. And this is a victim of that exact paradox, because this is one of the most natural smelling incense fragrances I've ever smelled, but it literally lasts like an hour or two. Like you're ready to reapply after an hour. And so, but if you make the fragrance more long lasting, it doesn't smell as natural. So there's this incense paradox, if you want to call it that. This is, if you can find a bottle of Bois d'Incense, which according to Parfumo is sadly discontinued. And I can't believe that, because it's one of the greatest examples of a classic church incense. So Bois d'Incense, I'll review one of these days. Another one would be something like Incense Avignon, which is, this is Bertrand Duchaufour's creation of a cold, churchy incense. It's very peppery, and there's obviously some citruses and other things, and I think ambery touches as well. But I really, really like this as well. One of the best just out-and-out incense fragrances I've ever smelled. I would like to smell more from Comme des Garcons. I think that's kind of a quirky niche brand that I would really like. And my all-time favorite, well, one of my all-time favorite incenses that really balances that blend of being long-lasting and also, smelling very realistic is Incense Extreme. This is the vintage Andy Tower bottle. This is what the Tower bottles used to look like before they were in his current pentagon form. So before they basically took on the pentagon form, he has used to do these just classic bottles, which are awesome. I love having this as a little collector's piece. But Incense Extreme is, again, an amazing incense that really balances his ambergris note with incense, but it really is long lasting. But I've been kicking around the idea of reviewing some of these incense scents that are some of my absolute favorites, and we will get to those very soon. But I really feel like there's a lot of pressure on me to do a proper review of like one of my all-time favorite incense fragrances. Needs to takes a lot of time and effort, and with something like Gincense, I don't feel the pressure because I don't own a bottle. And it's not what I would consider classically like one of the greatest incense fragrances of all time. However, to take a genre like incense and bend it, and as the website for Gincense said, to basically destroy it and manipulate it and deconstruct it and then ultimately try and redefine it into something else. Very, very impressive stuff, I will say. I'm very impressed. This is not a classical example of an incense, but it's an example of how to do a twist on a modern genre, unique and interesting and different. And you really have to give Oliver Valverde credit, I think, for taking this classic genre, twisting it a little bit, and then releasing something amazing. The only thing I will say, my only criticism of this, if I had one, is that late into the dry down, we're talking 7+ hours in, okay, which some people like to reapply, and that won't be an issue anyways. But if you're someone who applies once and goes the whole day, once you get to 7+ hours, let's say, I'm estimating, it may have been 6, it may have been 7.5 or 8, but I'm going to say 7 hours or so is where I really started to notice it. That white musk dry down and the lightening up of the incense, which I think the incense note here is used creating a couple different things, but there's probably elemi along with frankincense and some other things, but the elemi adds elements of the freshness to it. Elemi basically smells like a lemony, fresher take on incense. I've reviewed some elemi heavy fragrances on the channel, like for example, I've reviewed Honor Man by Amouage. That's one of my favorite examples of elemi, but this is a great example of elemi as well. But what happens is that the musks start to turn slightly laundry detergent in feeling, and the lemon note, which here smells so vibrant and like an explosion of flavor and freshness, starts to smell a little bit like lemon pledge. I'm talking late into the dry down though, okay? So imagine like light incense swirling the drain in the background with that lemon pledge thing going on. It's not as impressive late into the dry down, but that is a very, very small gripe for an otherwise fragrance that honestly captured my attention all day. I loved wearing it and really makes me want to try more from the brand. And the pricing seems very reasonable. As I've said, 95 euros or whatever it was. What did I say? 96 euros for 50 mils. Eau de Parfum, very, very fair pricing in my opinion. And the fact that they don't do the social media influencer thing is another attractive feature to me. The materials smell very high quality. And for a self-taught perfumer, I mean, surprisingly well blended. The details and the twists kind of go away from that traditional incense that you're expecting, and almost turns, my attention to something like a Japanese forest from time to time, or slightly balsamic smells, slightly lemony version. Excuse me. Imagine like a lemony version of like a green tinted cypress and hinoki forest or something like that, with the incense swirling through. And if you know the way Japanese or Asian fragrances are, the style of perfumery is done. It's done with a very deft hand, very light. They like light and gentle fragrances. They don't like their fragrance to intrude on somebody else. They're not Ram, okay? I'm like, if you don't like my fragrance, fuck you. But they like to have a very light and gentle. They're courteous of everyone else. And this is how kind of the green, foresty, medicinal touches feel in Gincense in the background. It doesn't feel like an evergreen or a pine forest or polo green in the background. The smell is kind of very crisp but calming and gentle. And the notes have been done with a very stingy hand. This is very impressive work for a self-taught perfumer, I will tell you that. Because I think if he did overdose those greener notes, the piney notes, the fir balsam notes, or whatever you want to call it, I don't know what the actual ingredients are, but let's just say you go with something like that pine type feel, because I did say it gives that pine sol like feeling earlier, that lemony pine sol, lemon pledge thing, late into the dry down. But, if you went heavier, I would say with the green foresty touches, you would overshadow, I think, the fresher, brighter aspects of the incense, which really shines here, really, really shines. And you could totally almost see this ceremony thing playing out in the background while you're wearing the scent. You know, this sacred ceremony playing out with incense and kind of something used to like unlock your mind, you know, put your soul at rest and unlock your mind and be at peace. So I think it's very common for a incense type fragrance to be blended in a way where there's usually some sort of ambery, heavier notes to come through. And even though he does admit labdanum is used here in one way or another, at least to my nose, it is gingerly used. Sorry, I couldn't help myself, but it is very gingerly used in Gincense. And so you're not going to get this big, heavy, ambery kind of overdose. You're not going to get this big amber accord that's going to take over everything over. Very, very impressive stuff from a perfumer to be able to round something out, add the depth and the touches, but do it with a deft, soft hand. And I think that incense note is so unique and different compared to what you're used to smelling that this has just made me want to explore this brand so much more. So thank you to Senator Eddie for very kindly sending me this very generous decant. As you can see, I put a pretty good dent in it. It was probably halfway full or something when I got it. So I've really enjoyed getting to know this. Thank you to everyone who sent me something. Please be patient if you have sent me something. I will try my best to get to everything, but there's only one RAM and a lot of fragrance to cover. So I hope this maybe introduced you to a new house, or if you're familiar with Oliver & Co. and now Avant-Garden Lab, do let me know. Love to hear your thoughts. As always, it's a pleasure doing these. Cheers, guys, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.